Hello and welcome to the monthly Bangkok RELO webinar. My name is Kelley Calvert and I'm coming to you live from Chiang Mai on behalf of the U.S. Embassy in Bangkok. Joining us today as co-host, we have Heather Van Fleet, a professional trainer and mentor at AUA Language Center in Bangkok. Our presenter this evening is Jeff Puccini. Jeff is an SIT licensed teacher trainer. He has taught English and trained teachers in Venezuela, South Korea, El Salvador, the US, and Thailand. Currently, he is a teacher trainer at AUA Chamchuri. Today, Jeff will be sharing some interesting techniques for using Quizlet in your classroom. The webinar will be about 1 hour long with time for questions at the end. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box and it'll be addressed during the Q&A part of the webinar. If you don't mind, maybe you could try out the chat box. Tell us your name and where you're calling from today. All right, it looks like we have Don from AUA Hua Mark.
Great, and thanks for that introduction, Kelley. I think we're gonna wait a few minutes and let some people join up. Maybe while we're waiting for people to join, let me just ask you about your lunch today. Did you have lunch today, Kelley?
I did have lunch here in Chiang Mai. We have a great service. I already told Heather about this when she was visiting. It's called Muscle Meals. So you can order high protein, low fat, very healthy protein-based food, and it's delivered to your house 5 days a week. So that's what I had for lunch. It was there for me when I got home, and I was very happy. How about you? What did you have?
Your meal sounds very convenient.
Yes, that's key in my life.
Yeah. I like to try to go once a week for some Indian food.
Nice.
So yeah, where I usually am, there isn't always Indian food at Jamjuri. But yeah, I try to explore some different places, and I found a new place today that has some good Indian food, and I got the they call it like a thali, so it's like many little side dishes. It was a little spicy, but yeah, delicious.
Yeah, great. It looks like we have quite a few people now tuning in, so if you want to take it away and share your screen, that would be great, Jeff.
All right. So yeah, first I want to just welcome everybody. I know that, whoops, let me go back. I know that as teachers, we're pretty busy. And so it's nice to have a little bit of time to share together. And of course, it's always a little bit more fun to do it in person, but that's not always convenient. So great to see everybody here on the webinar. And then also I want to thank you, Kelley and Heather and RELO Bangkok for all the effort that has gone into making this happen. So gratitude and thanks to the participants and to the people who are hosting. So thank you. So this is the outline. We're going to do a little bit of introductions to start off with, find out a little bit about who's here in the webinar, what your experience is, and then a little bit of background about vocabulary, my experience with vocabulary, and then we'll go into Quizlet a bit, and then I'll talk more specifically about the sets on Quizlet, and then I have some activities that I want to talk about. So these are things that I do with students in class, and then also students can do at home. And then, as you said, Kelley, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So as Kelley said, if you have questions as we go along, please just put it in the chat, and then Kelley will kind of collate those questions as they come in, and we can handle them at the end. Kelley, should I keep going?
Yeah, looks good.
All right, great. So the first thing we want to do is a poll. So we have 5 questions there, and I think, Kelley, you're going to go ahead and put that up for the participants so they can answer those questions.
Yes, so you should see a poll about you, and we're asking what grade you teach, where do you teach, and how many words per week do your students have to learn? So if you can take a moment to answer the poll, that would be great.
And while those answers are coming in, Kelley, I can tell you briefly my answers, and maybe if you'd like to share your answers too. So for me, the first question, what grade do you teach? Right now, I'm teaching a little bit of secondary, middle school students. And then in the past, I've taught quite a bit with university. It's probably the biggest one that I've taught. And then definitely adults, and then less so with primary. Right now I'm in Bangkok. And how many words per week do your students have to learn? For me, it's quite a lot. So that's part of the inspiration of this webinar, is that in the past, I kind of went with the textbooks, which tend to do a little bit fewer. A lot of the books I've used, they cover maybe 10 or 15 words a week. But now, yeah, my number is pretty high. It depends on the level of the students too, and why they're taking the class. But those are sort of my answers. How about you, Kelley?
Well, for me personally, I've mostly worked with university and graduate students. Right now I'm in Bangkok, and here I actually work more with younger learners, usually kind of middle school age. And in terms of how many words per week, so last year I was at Chiang Mai Ratchapat University, and I would have my students study around 15 to 20 words per week. But I'm looking now, we've got some answers to the poll. And interestingly, it looks like a lot of our teachers are working with adults and university students, although it is fairly mixed. And 50% of our teachers are in Bangkok and 50% are in other places. I am evidently the only one in Chiang Mai. In terms of how many words, most people said 10 to 20 or 20 to 30. But then a lot of others said it varies. Yeah.
Right. And I didn't get to see there, Kelley, with the poll, did the second set of questions get to go up also, the in general questions?
Not yet, but I can put that up now.
Put that up too. Yeah.
So here comes another poll for you. These are just some general questions.
Right. And so the idea is, if you don't know here, just kind of take a guess. So it's not about your specific students, but, if you had to guesstimate for number 4, or I guess it's number 1 now, that question says, how many words does a typical student know who has studied for 5 to 6 years, 4 times a week for 50 minutes per session? So if you just imagine that typical student, like a high school student, university student, what do you think? What's the number of words they would know? And then the second question there is, if you know 3,000 words, then what percentage of an academic text will you know? And so you see the choices there. Would you know 80% of the text, 90%, 95%, or 98%?
And just so you all know, I tried to get Jeff to tell me the answers yesterday because I really don't know. So don't feel bad if you don't know. And by the way, he didn't tell me.
I'm gonna make you guess though, Kelley.
Okay, so if I were to guess, I would say
wait till the results come in, because you don't want to spoil someone.
I don't want to spoil. Well, I can see the results. So most people agree with me and think around 3,000. Although it's split also between 4,000 and 5,000. Those are tied for second place. And in terms of if you know 3,000 words, what percent of an academic text will you know? I'm actually going to be an outlier. Nobody voted for this one, but I'm going to say 98%. Most of the people said 80%.
Right. Well, I think I was able to fool you a little bit, Kelley, but I wasn't able to fool the others. So this data comes from some reading that I was doing from Paul Nation, who's one of the leading experts in the field on vocabulary. And I'm going to share a resource later from Paul Nation. And so, according to him, the first one there, it is 3,000 is the answer, 3,000 words. And then the next question, if you know 3,000 words, then what percentage of an academic text will you know? And the answer is 80%. And so what's one thing that's significant about that is that the 98% there, that's the number that a lot of people say you need to have in order to be able to reasonably manage a text, an academic text, because then you can make guesses. But as soon as you start getting around like 95, 90, it's torture, like if there's 2 or 3 words per line that you don't know, then you can't really read it at all. So that's sort of what's significant about that. I have a few more questions we're going to do just to kind of find out about this topic a little bit more. Instead of the poll, we're just going to do it in the chat. So what you're going to do is take your guess here. So the first question is, how many words would a student who is B2 on the Common European Framework know? How many words? So B2 is an intermediate level speaker. And then C2 is the next question. So C2 is somebody who is quite proficient. That's the highest level of IELTS or CEFR. And then the last question, how many words do you think a native speaker knows? So as I said, if you could just go ahead in the chat and, if you don't know, go ahead, just take a guess, throw a number out there, and we'll put Kelley back on the spot in a minute here and see if she can guess.
So it looks like Rita is saying around 5,000 for number one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that sounds fairly reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
For number two, between 15,000, and for number three, 25,000.
Mm-hmm.
I have a guess for number three. How many words do you think there are in the English language, Jeff? I don't even have a point of reference there.
Right. It can be a difficult rabbit hole to go down because it's a little bit tricky to count, like if you take an example of the word get, right? So, oh, I know the word get, I got your message. But then we start throwing in all the phrasal verbs and the idioms. So sometimes they talk about the idea of word families. So if you have the words like success, then, success, successful, successfully, all the different parts of the word, it's still just one word. So numbers I've seen thrown out there for English are between like 600,000 to 1 million. And it's one of the things that is oftentimes said to be what makes English a challenging language to learn, is just the number of vocabulary words that there are compared to other languages.
That makes sense. I'm pretty sure my 5-year-old knows 1 million words. So,
so what's have we had any other guesses coming in?
We have a guess for B2 at around 500, C2 3,000, native around 8,000. Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and give us your guesses and then move on, or do you want to wait a little bit more for some more guesses?
I'm thinking probably for number one, maybe around 3,500. Number two, 7,000 native speakers. I mean, it has to be 100,000. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the native speaker.
It does depend on the native speaker. So maybe we'll go ahead then, just in terms of time, to sort of move forward, and I'll show you what we got. So Rita was pretty spot on there. So let's see if I have my next slide. Yeah. So there you can see, again, according to Paul Nation, the B2 speaker will know around 2,500, C2 around 10,000, and then the native speaker between 25 and 30,000. But it definitely depends a lot on who the native speaker is, in terms of their education and things like that. So one of the things that can be a little bit scary for people who are learning English are some of these numbers, and it can feel like, it's going to be hard. But there is some good news in these numbers. So the next slide here, don't panic. So one of the things they talk a lot about is this idea of frequency. And so meaning how frequent does the word appear in English? And so there on the screen, you'll see two resources. One is called the New General Service List. There used to be a General Service List, and then they updated it. So now it's called the New General Service List. And the numbers there mean that the list of words has 2,800 words. And these are the most frequent words that appear in English. So, you know, the, to be, to have, he, she, all of those really common words. And the good news there is that those 2,800 words account for about 90% of English. So if you know that 2,800, you're in good shape. And then the other list I referenced is the academic word list, and they have 570 words there. And those words are the ones that appear most frequently across all different academic disciplines. So it doesn't matter if you're studying in science or you know, sociology, literature, whatever. These are the academic words that will help you to do well in college. So yeah, you don't have to learn 25,000 words to be proficient, but you definitely need to make sure you know those words. So if you want to do this for yourself, or you want to use with your students, here's a couple websites. And basically what you do is you go onto the website and it'll ask you like, basically just, do you know the word or not know the word? And then based on the information you give it, it can give you an estimate about how many words you know. The first one, testyourvocabulary.com, is a little bit shorter and easier. So I'm not sure if it's as accurate. And then the second one is from our friend Paul Nation, and it's a little bit longer. It takes about 25 minutes to do that one. But it's something I've used with my students, depending on who they are, as a chance to sort of, you know, get a sense of how many words they know. So that's sort of the end of the first part of the webinar, introduction to some ideas about vocabulary. I'm going to go off the slides now for a couple minutes to show you some things on Quizlet, and then we'll come back to the slides. And the connection here is that Quizlet is this resource that I started using about 5 or 6 years ago with my students. And my students at that time were studying to go into university in the US. And Quizlet really changed the way we were able to help the students build their vocabulary. So it's been a great resource for me and my students. And then I've also used it myself as a learner with Spanish, and now especially with Thai, I've been using Quizlet. So let me show you a little bit about Quizlet. So if you want, you can kind of just follow along here, or if you have a device, you can also go to your device and kind of like listen and follow along, or you can, yeah, just sit back and, you know, listen. So when you search for Quizlet, you'll open it up and you'll get the sort of homepage like this. You can go around and look at the site and use things without actually signing up, but I would suggest signing up because it gives you a little bit more functionality. When you do sign up, it'll ask you for some of the basic information. I think I've saved it with my Google account here. So basically, what I wanted to show you is after you sign up, then what you can do is you can search. So one of the things that doesn't work as well on Quizlet is the search function compared to something like Google. So if you are teaching about jobs, you want to find some sets related to jobs, you put in jobs. And what it's going to give you is, you can see here at the top, 500 sets of job flashcards. So you can kind of just scroll through it and find one that sort of looks interesting to you. And so basically your options here when you use Quizlet are to create your own sets from scratch, or to use some pre-existing set just as it is, or to use the pre-existing set and edit it, which is usually what I would do. So you can see here the first set that popped up in the job search. It's not going to help unless you're studying, it looks like German is that one, so that's not going to be very good. The second set, there's only 8 terms there, so also maybe not as good. But then this one, I can see it has some nice pictures, and it has 20 terms, so maybe I like that set. So when you click on the set, this is what it looks like. And if you have signed in, I'm going to go to my other browser now and show you. So once you've signed in and you found a set that you like, there's a few different things I want to show you that you can do. So for example, this is a set that I made. It's called Food Issues. And so if you if you like this set, then you can copy it. And what else do I want to show you? Right, so I guess the other thing I wanted to mention, I forgot, when you sign up, sometimes when you put in that you're a teacher, it might try to direct you to the paid site. So Quizlet has a free version and then a paid version. I use the paid version. I think it's about $35 a year or something like that. The advantages of the paid version are that you can add your own pictures, and you can add your own voice. So, I think that's a benefit for me, but I think you can do most of what you need to do without the paid version. So I would suggest, if you haven't used it before, just start off without the paid version, and you'll find that there's a lot of great things you can do with it. The other thing I wanted to show you is about printing. So you can see this set here. And then for printing, if you come over to this icon, you click on print. And there's some different ways you can print it. It gives you some choices. But when we go to the next part of the webinar, I'm going to show you some activities that you can use when students have their phone, and then also if they don't have their phone. So the printing would be something you would do if your students don't have phones. So what I would do is I would select over here the layout to be small, and then it would open in a PDF, and then I would just print it. And then basically what you get is, a piece of paper that has the words and the definition. Okay, so that's the printing. And then there's two other things I want to show you while we're here on this set. So as you can see here on the left side, these are the words that are in the set, and then on the right side are the definitions. Select all. So you can see this set has 70 terms in it. So those are all of the terms and the definitions. And when you're studying Quizlet, one of the really cool features that you can have students do is over here on the right side, there's this little star. And so the idea with the star is, while students are studying, if there's words that they need more practice with, they can select that. They can star those words. And then that can help them focus their practice more. Instead of reviewing words they already know, they can just review the words that they've starred. So that's a cool little thing that Quizlet allows you to do. And then the last thing, when we go to the activities, I want to show you about Quizlet Live. So to do Quizlet Live with your students, they would need to have phones, and then you would need to have some kind of laptop. And then what you do is, from your set, so here, this is the food issue one, you just click on the Quizlet Live. And I've always done this one, the sort of free version of the game. So create the game. And then it will launch this screen and some music. I forgot about the music. So when you launch the screen, the students will have a code and they can join from their phones. And when we get into the last part of the webinar here, I'll show you a little bit about how to play Quizlet Live. But so those are the things I wanted to show you from Quizlet. So now let's go back to the slides. Okay. So we talked a little bit about setting up the free accounts versus the paid accounts. I don't think I mentioned, but it should be obvious that you can also, it has an app. And so that's the way my students are using it. They do that login on their phone and they use the app. And then about the sets. So we talked about the finding the sets versus creating your own from scratch, the printing, the Quizlet Live using stars. So the one thing I wanted to mention before we go into the activities here is that the way I would use Quizlet is not like as a way to start the lesson. So what I have here in the picture is from one of our textbooks, and this is like the first page in the unit. And you can see the topic is related to food, eat, drink, and be merry. And the starter says, what did you eat and drink yesterday? Make a list. Number 2, compare your list with the class. Who are the healthiest? So I like that activity. It's a nice way to get students sort of talking right away in class. And that would give you a chance to sort of find out what they already know, build some fluency. And then the book goes into, there's a reading there about this extraordinary ambition, and then there is an activity with vocabulary. But so what I'm saying is I would start with this in the book, and then with the Quizlet set, I might use it like at the end of class, assign it for homework, but as a way to do more. But I wouldn't just like, yeah, let's start by studying vocabulary. That's not the way I would use it. So let me talk about some of the activities that I've used. So the first one is a quiz. And yeah, I know different teachers, different students have had different experiences with taking quizzes, but I kind of think it's important because it can motivate students to study. And so even if it's not a part of a grade or anything like that, I think having quizzes, we also know from the science of learning, the research on that, that quizzing is a good way to help students practice and remember. So the way I do my quizzes is I will print the quiz, and then for scoring the quiz, I use this ingenious little system from my friend Josh. And so before, students would take the vocabulary quiz and it would just sort of be like they got the right answer or the wrong answer. But Josh's idea was to give them 3 points if they have the right answer and they spell it correctly, 2 points if they have the right word but they don't spell it correctly, and 1 point if they make a good guess. And I have found that this system works really, really well because it motivates students to, you know, take risks and try. And we have some good laughs too about the making a good guess. You know, sometimes they'll write the word like dog and I'm like, well, that's not really a good guess for the word vegetarian. So yeah, that's one method I use for scoring. And then the basic steps that I do for the quiz are there. The first step is at the beginning of class, I'll do some kind of speaking activity. And the idea here is to discourage the students from cramming, because we know as students ourselves that, you know, if you have a quiz, what you're going to do is you're going to forget about it and then you're going to study real hard before you have the quiz to try to do well. But again, from research on science of learning, we know that might help you do a little better on the quiz, but it's not going to help you remember the words. So I go over this routine with the students before the first quiz so they understand we're going to put away our phones, we're not going to study, we're going to have this other activity. And so that kind of erases the short-term memory if they were trying to cram. And then step number 2, okay, now by yourself, do the quiz. And then because I don't do the quizzes as real high stakes sort of thing, and I'm always looking for ways to sort of save my time, I'll say, okay, let's trade papers, trade with somebody else. I'll get the answers up on the board. So we just trade, score right away. And then they give them back to their partners. Number 4, return and reflect. So the reflection questions might be something like, talk to your partner about how well you did on the quiz. Did you meet your expectations, exceed your expectations, under your expectations? And talk a little bit about why, you know, how much did you study this week? So the idea here is trying to build some of that metacognitive awareness. So students are thinking about their own studying and their own learning. So that reflection part is really important. And then if I need to, I might collect them and record them. But recently I haven't been using the quizzes that way, just have the students take them. They're for the, you know, their own records. And then at the end of the class, I'll have a final vocabulary test so that students will know that, yeah, we're doing all these words every week, but you have to keep studying because at the end of the term, we're going to test all of the words. So that's one activity, doing quizzes, which can be fun and, well, maybe not super fun, but, you know, it can motivate students to study the words. Okay. Next, so here are some activities that I do without the phones. So, you know, sometimes technology is not reliable. Sometimes all your students don't have phones. Sometimes it's nice just to have paper. So what I would do is I would print out the words. So like I showed earlier, print them out, and then I would cut them. And depending on how many words there were, how many students in class, maybe I would do 1 of each, or, you know, maybe I would print out 2. So there's, you know, duplicates. And then I would give everybody these, basically it says cards, but they're strips. So the strip, you can see it has the word here and then the definition here. So for the solo study, what I would do is give students different strips, and I would have them fold it first so that then they read the definition, and then they try to test themselves, remember what the word is, so then they can flip it over and check. Oh yeah, that's ingredients. So I feel like that time is useful for students to just have a little quiet time, study by themselves. And then the next activity, the quiz trade, You can do this as a mingle activity. So everybody's got their little set of cards that they've been studying, 3 cards, 5 cards, 8 cards, whatever it is. So you stand up and you walk around and you just sort of show your partner your definition, and then they try to guess it. And then they show you theirs like that. And then afterwards you trade, right? So I have my 3 and my partner has their 3. And then I give them theirs, I give them mine, and they give me theirs, and then I go and find another partner. So that's a fun sort of mingle activity, way to move around and study the words. The last one here without the phones, card sorting. So what you could do here is put students in groups, and you could give them all of the words or some of the words, depending on how many there are. And then as a group, the students have to look at the words and try to make categories. So this sort of encourages some creativity and some critical thinking. How might we put these words together? You know, it's kind of up to them. Maybe there's some words that are things that are, maybe it's parts of speech they want to sort them by. Maybe it's, I don't know, it could be different things that are related more to people, things that are related more to places. You know, they come up with their ideas, sort them. And then what's fun is you can have the groups switch, and then they go and look at different groups and they try to guess what was the system, how did they sort these words. So that's kind of a fun little game with the cards. Okay, and then with the phones, so if your students all have phones, the first thing there is a solo study, which is sort of similar to the cards. I call it a do now activity, which is something you see a lot, especially in K-12 in the US. A lot of teachers are using this kind of do now. So the idea with the do now is that a lot of teachers talk about how classroom management is an issue. The students are, you know, not always paying attention. The atmosphere is not the way they want it to be. So with a do now activity, the teacher will put on the board what it is. And so then as students enter the classroom, you know, some students come early, some students come on time, some students come late. There's this routine of a do now. And there could be some different ones, like Kelley has a great routine with journal writing. This is one with Quizlet. So the students come in, they say, okay, do now today is solo study on the phone. So they're just coming quietly, take out their phone and study on Quizlet. And I would do that like for the first 5 minutes of class. And I feel like it really helps with classroom management. It helps kind of focus the energy. And so the students know what to do when they always have some different regular kinds of do now activities. And then if I've done the solo study, there's some different options for pair studying. You can kind of read through those there. But one thing I was thinking for the pair studying is it can also be helpful if you have these or some other ones and just kind of put them up maybe on a poster or whatever, and give the students the choice how they want to study. Because we also know in terms of motivation that when students have a choice in the way they study, that can be really, motivating for them. So I could be with my partner Kelley and say, hey, you know, Kelley, I really want to work on the spelling. So why don't we do this one? You say the word and then I'll try to spell it. And then we can kind of go back and forth. And then maybe Kelley wants to work on the other one about student 1 looks at the phone. I read the definition. Kelley's student number 2, she's not looking at her phone and she tries to say the word. So something like that can be a fun way to study. And then the last one is the Quizlet Live. I showed you about how to get on there. You need a minimum of 4 students to do Quizlet Live, and maximum, I don't know. I've done it with 30. I had 30 middle school boys, and it was pretty cool. They get very intense and focused, and the energy is pretty fun. I don't know how many you could go up to, but you know, give it a try and let us know. So those are some of the activities that I do for in class with the phones, without the phones, and then at home. So this is what I think is one of the greatest assets of Quizlet, is that it takes some of this power of learning and puts it in the hands of the student. So, you know, some of the students are going to take advantage of that. Some of them aren't. That's just the way it goes. But so what we know from the science of learning is that retrieval practice is really key for being able to remember things. So that means if you're just reading a list of words, that's not going to help you because you don't have to test yourself. Retrieval practice means test yourself. So on Quizlet, you can use the flashcards, you can use the different games, and you have to try to remember what was that word again? So retrieval practice, that's built into Quizlet. Spaced repetition, this means doing the study not all in one like cram session. So this is not built into Quizlet, but it's something that I work with my students on to say, okay, we're going to have a test on Monday with the vocabulary, so you should study 10 minutes on Tuesday, 10 minutes on Thursday, 10 minutes on Friday. So spacing out the practice, that's really going to help the students do better on the quiz. And then there's all these different ways for them to use the Quizlet. You can check out. I usually use the flashcards, and then the Learn function is one that I probably use the most. What I like about Learn is that it starts with matching. So it'll give you the definition, and then you have to try to match it. And once you've gone through it and you've gotten it for matching, then it gets harder, and it'll ask you to actually type the word. And if you keep messing up, like you can't remember the word, then it'll go back to matching for that word. So it has that built-in sort of algorithm to help you with the words that you need help with. So those are some of the at-home activities that you can have students do. So Kelley, how are we doing on time and questions?
Hi, Jeff. So the time we have about, I would say, 10 minutes that we could use for question and answer. Mm-hmm. I've really enjoyed listening to what you had to say about Quizlet. One question or comment that came in, Tony suggested a minimum of using 12 terms in the deck, and I was wondering if you might have a minimum and maximum that you recommend.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. You want to have that kind of minimum. I like that idea too, Tony, the 12 minimum. So I sort of have hinted at this earlier, that I've been experimenting with trying to do big, like especially for these kind of like pre-intermediate level students, not beginner, but pre-intermediate, and giving them these sets for a week to study with like 70 words. The thought being that we saw in the beginning, to be intermediate, you need those 2,500 words. So once you start doing the math, you realize that this is a big hurdle, and it can be tricky because you don't want to overwhelm somebody. But what I have found with a lot of my students is that they're given a task, right? They're given a bar. You got 70 words to learn this week, dude. And they're like, all right, game on, that's a challenge. So that's sort of where I'm trying to go, like really trying to motivate and inspire them. But it can backfire for sure. Like if you have some people who are like, there's no way I can't do that. So I would say experiment. But I guess my message too is to like, don't be afraid to try to set the bar high.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Tony said 12 terms for live to work properly. So he was specifically talking about the live feature.
Right. Yeah. If you tried to do it with a small set, it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. And we have another question. Annie would like to know if you create the sets to cover an entire unit.
That's sort of what I did with the headway. So I found the picture that I showed was from the food unit. And I think that was in a gold level class that I taught. So I had that set for the whole unit. So I would give the students the set, not necessarily the first day of the unit, but as we're into the unit. And so they're kind of like working through it. So we would do these different activities throughout the first week and the second week of class as we're going through the unit. And then the quiz that I would do would be towards the end of that unit.
Great. I noticed one thing that you mentioned about the difference between the paid and the unpaid subscriptions.
Yep.
One of the things you said is that if you pay for the subscription, then you can record your voice. Can you explain, how you would use your voice or why you would want to record your voice?
Yeah. So some of the different activities you can do, it's one right here, the audio one. The students can hear the word and then they have to type it. And then also just when you're studying like the flashcards that learn, you can turn the audio feature on or off so you're listening to it. So if you haven't done the paid version, you'll have the computer read it for you in English, which, you know, for me, it seems fine. The English from the computer is fine. I have had some students who like to hear me, so I would record myself saying it. Honestly, for the recording, for me, I have to do it for Thai because the computer can't speak Thai, at least my computer. So I have a friend of mine who records the words in Thai, and then that can really help me. So, you know, I would say I think I said it before, just that for getting started with Quizlet, the free version gives you a lot. So try it out. And then, you know, if you want to use it for other things with the audio or pictures, then $35 is, you know, it is what it is.
So Tony's adding to what you said, and he's mentioning that the paid subscription gives you some different options. So for example, you can choose to list the word and choose one of 4 definitions, or you list the definition and choose from one of 4 words. Just to give an example.
Right, that's what the Quizlet Live, I think that Tony's saying.
List the word. Sorry, I couldn't put that together. Thank you, Tony. List the word.
Right. And also there's another feature too with the paid version that you can sort of basically like stalk your students. So you can create classes, which you can do with the unpaid one. You can create a class, which makes it much easier for your students to find your sets, because as I mentioned, searching on Quizlet can be a little bit tricky. But if you create a class, you just call it like, you know, Annie's AUA class, then you can put all those sets into that class. Students can search for the class, find your sets. With the paid version as a teacher, then you can say for homework, I need you to do the activity for match and the activity for spell. You got to do those 2 activities tonight for homework. And the students will have joined your class, and then you can track and see if they did it. So, you know, that could be useful for some teachers to see if their students are really doing their homework.
Okay, so a couple more questions. How often do you ask students to practice on Quizlet? Do you test them after? And third, how effective do you think Quizlet is in learning? So again, the first one was, how often do you ask students to practice on Quizlet?
I think when I first started with it, I was just sort of like, all right, here it is, guys. So go and do it on your own, right? But then I realized that that wasn't really working for everybody. And so it made more sense to incorporate a little bit in class every week. So I would assign it for homework, and then we would, you know, one day we would do Quizlet Live for 10 minutes. Another day we would do the Do Now activity with the solo study and then the partner work. So I would include a little bit. I wouldn't spend too much time on it in class, but a little bit of work in class. And then, sorry, what was the other question, Kelly?
So the second question was, do you test them after?
Right. Yes. So I think what I was sort of mentioning before with the testing, that I think there's definitely like anxiety and some fear that people have with testing. But what I was trying to emphasize from the science of learning is that we know that's actually a really great way to learn. When I was in college, it was really typical to have like a midterm and a final. And all the research shows that's like the worst way to help somebody learn, is just to test them once or twice. If you really want to help people learn, you got to continually test them, but try to do it in a way that feels like it's interesting, enjoyable, the students are getting feedback, and it's not super high stakes. So I feel like by doing the testing the way I described, with the little scoring system and, you know, just trading the papers with their partner, they could cheat if they really wanted to, but the idea is that the test is a way to help them learn. So I try to test them in a typical class probably once a week. If I have an 8-week class, then maybe I'm testing them 7 times and then a final test, something like that. So smaller, easier tests. And then also for the test, I wouldn't make it too massive. So if I have like a 60 or 70 word set, I'm only going to make the test like 10 or 12 words. So it's not going to be a huge time waster or time user. We'll do it for a little bit. It'll be a part of a class, 10 minutes, and then move on. And then how effective is it? I think, like with anything, it depends on the student. But what we all know now in education is that people are on their phones all the time. And so what I'll say to my students is like, okay, you're taking the bus, you're taking the train, you're going to be watching a YouTube video, you're going to be playing your Candy Crush or whatever it is. So just take 5 or 10 minutes, go on the Quizlet and go through one learn cycle. And so it's about making it a routine, because once something becomes a routine, like it's something you do all the time, then it's just automatic. You don't think about it. And so if we can kind of include Quizlet into the way students are studying and thinking about vocabulary into their everyday life, then yeah, I think the results I've seen have been very impressive.
Great, thank you. There's one other comment that I wanted to mention about the benefits of live. Tony also pointed out that when you use this live feature, it will also pop up and show the questions and answers that students were most confused by or had the most problems with. And that can be really beneficial formative assessment for a teacher.
Right, exactly. So then you can do a little bit more work with with those words that students aren't understanding. And the same thing happens, I'm not sure if in the free account or the teacher's account, but definitely when I've created classes, I have gotten data about the percent of the words the students are getting right as they're studying. So it's probably in the teacher's account that I get that, but that's the same kind of thing where you can find out about what are the words the students are struggling with. Likewise, you could just ask students too, right? So they're solo studying, they're doing different things, they're starring things. So which words are you having trouble with? And then maybe those are the words to go a little bit deeper with. Because honestly, the things I've described are pretty sort of receptive level, right? We haven't talked about getting into actually using the words in writing, using the words in speaking. It's a little bit more about recognition. What's the word? What's the definition? So yeah, you can do a lot more.
Great. So there's a few more comments. I'm not really seeing any more questions. So I think, did you have a couple of parting thoughts for us, Jeff?
Sure. I have a list. We did the Q&A, and I have some references. So I think this webinar will be saved. And so if you want to access the references that I mentioned, these are a list of the references. There's a couple of books there that I didn't talk about explicitly, but they're books related to the science of learning. The last one there is by Dan Willingham. That one's a little bit more for K-12 teachers, but it's an easy read and it's solid. And then the one in the middle by Daniel Schwartz, The ABCs of How We Learn. That was a book where like each chapter kind of goes through the letters, A through Z, each letter. There was something that was just very succinct and applicable. So that if you're going to read one book about the science of learning, I would recommend one of those two. And then just to wrap it up, I have a little quote from one of our luminaries in the field of education, Paulo Freire. So Freire said that the teacher is, of course, an artist, but being an artist does not mean that he or she can make the student's profile, can shape the students. What the educator does in teaching is to make it possible for the students to become themselves. And so for me, what I like about that quote is that, connected to our topic here today with Quizlet, we can't make students learn. We can't make them learn vocabulary, but by being role models, by studying ourselves, by providing resources and opportunities for students to learn, then we can, increase the chances of their learning. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I really enjoyed your webinar tonight, and I think all of our participants would have gained some very tangible techniques that they can bring back into their classroom. So I wanted to let everybody know that we will have another webinar next month, And if you would like more information about that, please check us out on Facebook. You can follow RELO Bangkok or AUA Language Center. Both of those links are at the top of our chat box, so please click on those and follow us and you'll get that information. And on behalf of AUA Language Center and RELO Bangkok, I would like to thank everyone for taking time out of their night this evening to join us. Thank you all very much.